Now we're going to turn to the United States because that is where, in the Midwestern state of Iowa, candidates who are vying for the Democratic nomination to oppose Donald Trump in November's presidential election face the first test of their campaigns. It is called the Iowa Caucus, where thousands of gatherings throughout the state take place and voters pick and choose their preferred candidate. The results will be known a little later this evening. We'll bring you the results, of course, but let's, before that, speak to Professor Cary Covington, who's an expert on the state's caucus and its importance for the candidates. You also teach at the University of Iowa. Thank you for joining us live now. When it comes to the importance of this caucus, it doesn't decide who goes on, but it's been a really good litmus test. Explain to us how this works.
Well, the reason it's important is the first time that voters actually act on their preferences for candidates. So polls tell us one thing, but people actually voting for a candidate tells us another. And doing well in Iowa usually helps candidates, gives them a boost to do well in future races, while doing poorly in Iowa tends to set candidates on another track where they often end up leaving the race after another 3 or 4 contests.
And the voting itself is quite interesting because it's done in public. So your neighbours, your family, your friends, they'll all know how you vote.
Absolutely. The caucus is a throwback to an old way of doing candidate selection, and it involves meeting with people in your neighborhood, your friends and neighbors who identify with the same party as you. And you meet in a room, and once you're organized, the supporters of the different candidates separate into different parts of the room. And then heads are counted, and we find out how much support there is in each of these places. These are small places, usually called precincts. And at that point, a state rule that requires candidates to get 15% of the vote goes into effect. And if you don't get 15% of the support, then your supporters have to either drop out of the process or throw their support behind another candidate. And then a second round of voting happens, and then we get an idea of how many people support the candidates who are viable. And then finally, the state assigns delegates based on how the candidates did in that second round of voting.
So how do you define who wins this? What are you looking out for?
Well, it's very interesting. Up until the 2020 election, we basically got a rough idea of what percentage of the vote the candidates got, but nothing authoritative, and then the delegate head counts that were awarded. This time around, we're going to learn how did the voters allocate themselves across all the candidates, regardless of whether they were viable or not. We've never seen that before. And then we get the realignment after the non-viable candidates are set out, and then we get the delegates. So it's an open question, which is the most meaningful. Is it the initial round of voting, or is it after the candidates have a chance to pick up second place support? Those are the two important numbers. And the second number will tell you more about the breadth of a candidate's support, whereas the first round will tell you more about the intensity of the candidate's support.
Professor Covington, we're out of time, so I can't pin you on the spot to ask you who to name a name, but thank you so much for joining us there. That's fascinating stuff. Of course, we will have a live and extended coverage here on BBC World News a little later tonight.
Thank you.